Donald J. Trump of the state of Florida has received 312 votes. Kamala D. Harris of the state of California has received 226 votes. This announcement of the state of the vote by the President of the Senate shall be deemed a sufficient declaration of the persons elected President and Vice President of the United States.
And that is how it's done. President-elect Trump's victory is certified exactly 2 weeks before he will be sworn in the inaugural on January the 20th for the second time, which has only happened one other time in U.S. history. So it is a very big January that we roll into here. You saw Vice President Harris carrying out her duties and what the New York Times called an awkward task of certifying the vote that she lost, although it has been done before by Al Gore, by Richard Nixon in similar situations. Trump reportedly watched it all, as you would expect, at Mar-a-Lago today, feeling, quote, pure vindication, as he should. It was a resounding electoral win. And that is the way it works. So let's bring in our panel. Gerry Baker, Wall Street Journal editor-at-large and Fox News contributor. Rich Lowry, National Review editor-in-chief, and Jessica Charlo, host of The Five. What a great panel to start the year off with. Great to have you all here. Welcome. Happy New Year, everybody. Gerry, let me get your thoughts on what we just witnessed, a very civilized announcement of the winner of the 2024 election by the loser.
Yeah, it is an awkward moment. Obviously, you said there have been precedents. It's several times it's happened in the last 50, 60 years or so. But that is democracy in action. That is how it should be. That is, a losing candidate, as it happens to be the vice president. She, therefore, is the president pro tem of the Senate, has that duty to do that. That is how it should look. It quite looked like that 4 years ago, as we well know. And we're all glad to say that, fortunately, there is no disagreement about the result this time, and America can unite, I hope, around the president.
Your thoughts, Rich?
Yeah, well, look, I don't praise Kamala Harris very, very often, or maybe ever, but standing up and doing that's not easy, and she fulfilled her constitutional role, so hats off to her. Obviously, January 6, 2021 will always be a black mark, but you got to remember, in 2017, the other side was not in much of a mood to accept Donald Trump
Absolutely
either.
Not.
And one of the reasons he has much greater head of steam this time around, there's been no effort to get faithless electors to vote against him. There's no conspiracy theory about how he won centered on Russia, and there's not going to be a 2-year-long investigation blighting his initial term.
Jessica?
Well, I think that there's a big difference between people questioning the results of the election and then ultimately showing up to vote to ratify them. Hillary Clinton coming out and giving a concession speech and, yes, giving a few cable news interviews afterwards, talking about how he didn't think it was an illegitimate win versus what happened on January 6th. And it has been interesting is the kindest word I can see to watch all of these Republicans who came out in the wake of January 6, 2021, calling about a dark day in American history, that Donald Trump is personally responsible, that he should be held responsible for it. And now, they have fancy jobs in the new Trump administration, or they're, Senator Thune, the new majority leader, walking around saying, well, I was clear about what happened then, and I just want to move on and I want to move forward. And that is where the American people are. I don't live in
that's exactly the most important thing. The American people, I think regardless of the fact that there were efforts to try to drag them back to January 6th, they were done with it. And that isn't, where they, there's no judgment on that. That is the fact. They were over it.
But
they were done with it.
But it doesn't mean that we should pretend that it didn't happen,
no,
or that he did
with history.
Well,
yeah, I think
some people do want to rewrite it, like the president himself. A day of love is not what that day looked like.
But Martha, to Jessica's point, I mean, that has been litigated. January 6th has been litigated, both literally in certain respects, thanks to the efforts of Jack Smith and others in Georgia and elsewhere. That has literally been litigated, hasn't gone anywhere, and it has been politically litigated because we've just had an election where the man who was accused of being responsible for what happened on January 6th put himself forward to the American people again and won bigger than he won in 2016, won won the popular vote and won the Electoral College vote too. So, yes, we all can look back on that day and say, never again, we hope, please God. But it has been absorbed by the American people, processed by the American people, and they've decided that whatever happened then, these are the circumstances of right now that Donald Trump should be president.
Yeah, if there's been a referendum on January 6th, Trump would have lost. But there are other concerns that are more prominent in voters' minds, the border prices and all the rest of it.
But he's the person that they chose, regardless of all of that. And I think that is, and we never, history is what it is, and you look back at that day. But I think it's so interesting that the people of the country elected the person who was there on that day as the person who they believe can fix where we are right now, and with some pretty revolutionary plans and ideas. And we'll see how that plays out. Here's one person who is not in the greatest mood these days. Here's Joe Biden, the current president. Watch.
I know more world leaders than any one of you ever met in your whole goddamn life. And I know them, and I know how they think. Not a joke. What really hurts is when we talk about immigration the way we do.
Sometimes it's fuzzy, Jessica, whether I'm watching like an impression of Joe Biden or the real deal. And that was the real deal. Where do you think he is right now?
I think that he's
physically
there.
And mentally.
I think that
Where's there? Be more specific.
Maybe over at the SNL set a little bit. I mean, that feels like a parody of what people have been talking about with Joe Biden. And I think it's unfortunate that it's ending in this way. I have hoped kind of over the last several months that we would get back to more of the conciliator in chief, the empathizer in chief, where he would be able to be more of the 2020 Joe Biden, talking about the real pain and traumas that Americans have gone through. And yes, what he has done to try to fix that and improve the economy. And there are real metrics that you can point to say that we have gone in a positive direction. But I worry that he's a little too angry at this particular moment.
I think he's ending his presidency pretty dismally, I mean, pretty catastrophically, actually. And, everybody looks back 4 years ago and says Donald Trump ended his presidency badly because of January the 6th, and they were right. But look at what Joe Biden's done. So, he's pardoned his son. Most people, I think, agree that was a kind of disgraceful thing to do, especially the kind of preemptive or the nature of it, that any crime that he's never even been accused of yet that he may have committed, he's been pardoned for that. He's come out with this host of, somewhat dubious, I think it's fair to say, presidential medals, pinning medals on all kinds of people, but not all Americans, certainly are models for all Americans. He did this decision on Nippon Steel and the takeover of the U.S. Steel Company last week, which is a disgraceful kick in the teeth for one of our most important allies on no basis whatsoever. He's really, I'm sorry to say, but, he had a chance to go out on a high note, having stood down last July and having come out of having his designated successor, having lost the race, and he just hasn't. He's coming out on a very...
If there hadn't been for that debate, the Democrats would still be maintaining Joe Biden could serve 4 years and he's as fit as he's ever been. It's just the debate exposed the lie, and they finally had to admit it. But even now, Chuck Schumer's like, no, he was great. We weren't making anything up. We weren't covering for anything.
Yeah, no, it's stunning. And I think that's the coda on this story will be how much some people in the White House separate themselves from what they wish they could have said and couldn't say, or who prevented them from stepping in a lot sooner. Great to have all of you with us. Happy New Year to all of you. I hope we'll see lots of you as we head into these really very historic months ahead. Good to have you all.
Thank you.